What's the funniest thing that a random stranger said to you that made you die laughing inside? Story 1. Watched a guy walking to class at my college years ago, saying, "Get the out of my way," to a pigeon standing in his path. The pigeon quickly waddled off to the side. Story 2. When I was around 10, my dad took my brother and me to a Sox game at Fenway. We get to the park, and I was putting mustard on a hot dog from one of those mustard box push-down nozzle things. This random guy next to me goes, "Yep, buddy, lather that up." 10-year-old me thought it was about the funniest thing I'd ever heard, and I still chuckle when I think about it as an adult. Edit. Thanks for the great comments and gold silver, everyone. I've been laughing about this all day. I was at a 50th wedding anniversary party, and there were lots of elderly people in attendance. An old man was standing next to me and said, "It looks like a graveyard in here." I literally spit my beer out. We were outdoors. The kicker was the guy was close to the same age as everyone else. Story 3 years ago, when queuing up for movie tickets with my family, the attendant asked the ages of our 4 kids to see if they could all get children prize tickets. I announced their ages, 7, 9, 11, 13, without missing a beat. The stranger behind us declared, "That's an odd group." Story 4. An old man on the street with a big jack-o'-lantern grin on his face and 2 chihuahuas under each arm, loudly proclaiming to no one in particular, "I used to carry grenades. Now I carry dogs." Story 5. Just the other day, checking out at the Cracker Barrel, the older gentleman ringing my wife up accidentally said, with all confidence, "Have a thank you." Story 6. I was at a gas station filling my truck with gas and overheard a guy yelling at his dog to move over in the car so his wife could get in. It went like this, man: "A dog, come on, get in the middle so mommy can get in." Dog starts yipping back at him as if she's arguing, man, to dog, "Quit arguing me. I told you to get in the middle. You don't always get your way, dog." Again, yipping back at a man to dog, "If I have to tell you again. You're not getting your jerky." Holds up a stick of beef jerky, doji yipping, while reluctantly moving to the middle man to dog. "Okay, promise no more arguing me. And you'll be a good girl." Dog yipping again, man to dog. "Okay, seal it with a kiss." Dog gives man kiss. Had me dying. Edit. Hot. This post blew the F up. Thank you, random citizens, for my first silvers and first gold. You guys are awesome. Also, to clear a few things up, the dog was a Brittany Spaniel, which is a medium-sized dog, and they were in a single cat pickup. Also, it was in Maine, and if it was any of your parents or SOs, you guys rock, and still make me laugh about it to this day. Glad I could brighten everyone's day. Something I overheard as 2 kids walked past our caravan park site, a rumbling boom of distant thunder. Kid 1. I like thunder. It sounds like a 200-year-old dog who's retired and helps old people who are blind get around. Kid 2. Silence. Kid 1. Kid 2. But why is it retired? Kid 1. Because it's old. Kid 2. But it's still helping blind people. Kid 1. Silence. Story 7. A few years ago, I let my friend cut my hair. It did not go well. I was living in Philadelphia at the time and was walking through South Philly when I passed 2 strangers in the middle of the conversation. As I pass, one of them says to the other, "Hold up, I got to talk to this guy." He proceeds to shout to me, "Ayo, your hair looks like, come over here." I was amused, partially because of his bluntness and partially because he wasn't wrong. I was curious, so I walked over to him. He says, "Look, a buddy of mine owns a barber shop 2 blocks away. Hey, race his business card. I'll write my name on there. If you mention that I sent you, he'll give you a good deal." Bruh. But seriously, take care of that. I never ended up going to his friend's shop, but I frequently use this story as the perfect example of Philly culture: rude, blunt in your face, yet somehow coming from a place of genuine care. Plus, it's hilarious. Okay, the laughter was not entirely inside, but years ago on the subway in New York, a crazy dude walks on the train and screams at everyone you're all going to, and then steps off as the doors close. Total silence as the weirdness of the moment settles in. Then, without missing a beat, guy across from me goes, "I thought this train was going to Harlem." Entire subway car of cynical New Yorkers bursts out laughing. I'm in the bathroom at work washing my hands, and one of the professors that I don't think I've ever actually spoken to comes in and starts washing her lanyard in the sink. I try to make small talk with work people even though I at it, so I try to strike up a conversation that goes down as follows. "Morning. Ugh, hi. I spilled coffee on my lanyard and now it's all sticky, blah. That's the worst." At this point, she turns off the faucet and looks at me completely deadpan with eyes that said she wanted to feed me my own innards and said, "I think genocide is worse." I awkwardly mumbled, "Yekabahavian today," and quickly escaped. It's turned into a running joke in my office now, though. Anything from the printer being out of toner to a fire drill on a cold day is literally worse than genocide. Story 8. The college I attend frequently has local elementary and middle school kids on tours, especially on Fridays. One particular Friday, I was in line for the cafeteria when a group of kids came walking by with a tour guide. One kind of chubby little dude looked a bit uncomfortable. He was biting his lip a little and sweating. This part of the tour is usually when they have a bathroom break, and clearly Buddy needed to go. At this point, I should note that the bathrooms are visible from where we're standing, but the tour guide, a fellow student of mine, didn't seem to notice. She just kept going on and on, talking about the history of the building. I watched this kid go from nervous to deeply anxious to visibly clenching over a span of about 3 minutes. He's staring at the stick figure dude on the men's bathroom sign, as if it was the risen Christ. MS, tour guide takes a break in her spiel. I figure she's done. The next words out of her mouth will be ones to free this boy from the purgatory that is having to use the bathroom on a school trip. I tell L be over. He'll be free. What followed instead was this. So in 1995, a professor named ABC, Kalamazoo, move Lady Inganamai, he ran past her to the bathroom and presumably destroyed it. Poor guy had the entire line in tears with laughter, though. Edit him not from Kalamazoo. And Professor Albert Bach Cornelius Kalamazoo isn't real. Sorry to crush y'all's dreams, but he does live through all of our hearts. Also, thanks for all the gold, or whatever. It feels weird to get such attention, however fleeting, for just wanting some chicken tenders and witnessing a kid almost himself. Story 9. I used to be a smoker. One time a scruffy-looking man asked me for a light. I told him I only had matches. It was very windy, he said. That's okay, there's a trick to it. You light the match and then down real hard. You get a mouthful of sulfur that way, but you gotta have a trick when you're going 30 miles an hour on top of a tank. Story 10. Little girl to me, after I explain my service dog, helps me when I'm sick-o. So he's your dog tore me, trying to keep a straight face, yes, exactly. Story May 11th of 2000. Passing through Norwood, Louisiana with a friend. At around 2 in the afternoon, we stopped to gas up, grab some snacks at the most podunk gas station known to man. A young man, extremely agitated, comes in with frustrated gestures and angrily shouts gestures at the cashier with an accent that is beyond region, beyond stereotyping, beyond anything I have heard before where to got damned Wally Melions at the top of lungs, approaching hysteria and tears. Story 12. I was doing tech support over the phone for an internet company at a call center. I got a call from an elderly woman because her internet stopped working. After checking remotely that the modem was working and that there was no issues on her area, I was scheduling a visit from one of our technicians when she suddenly says, "Oh, I know what happened. The cat was playing around the router yesterday, right? You think it took a cable or something? No. He probably took away the Wi-Fi. You mean like he moved the router? No. He probably took the airwaves of the Wi-Fi. You know how cats see things we can't. He surely say the Wi-Fi signal, grabbed it, and took it away. It took all my willpower to not laugh in her face and finish the call." Story 13. I work in retail, and I'm not sure why, but this had me dying for a while. I still laugh when I think about it. "Me, how you doing today, sir?" "Customer, yep." And he went on his way. Story 14. No, so much said to me as overheard. Walking down the street with my fiancé. After dinner, a man and woman pass us. Very clearly I heard the man say, "And that's the second time I got crabs. I just keep a special little comb at the house now, just in case. I'm not sure of any particulars and have thought about that interaction often." So many questions. I know they heard me laugh, though. Edit everyone. Thanks for all the great stories. Good to know there's so many jokers out there in the world. Story 15. In college. This one girl in the front of the room chimes in on something and mentioned that her eyes change color during the summer every year from blue to green. This black dude in the back of the class whispers to his friend, "Yeah, and I turn white in winter." I had to remove myself immediately before I made a scene from laughing so hard. Story 16. I was rollerblading down a hill too fast and landed on my painful, sure, but not excruciatingly so. An old man walked by and said in the most jolly voice, "Is your behind okay?" Young lady, I was shaking of laughter. My behind was okay, yes. Story 17. I have a 5.5-pound chihuahua. He's about as intimidating as a bunny rabbit. I was walking him on the grass along the road. A couple of walkers were coming near me, and my dog started barking at them. So I picked him up. The guy says, "Thank you for picking him up. We were really scared." Story 18. Man, I respect women. I would never ever hit a woman, but ID cut it up. Homeless man, I ain't gay. ID never let a man, but ID blow him for money. Same homeless man, he's my hero at a festival and sitting around the campfire when a very intoxicated man kept saying, "I need to borrow your fireplace." He wouldn't let it go, despite being right by the fire. Turns out he needed a lighter for a cigarette and was so drunk that he forgot what it was called. My laughter was not internal. I died laughing right in front of him. Edit my first gold. Thank you, internet friend. Story 19. I once was canoeing with my fiancé for the first time, and we were having a bit of trouble at first getting a rhythm going, so we were along the edge of the water hitting the canal. This random couple was walking along the wall and said to his wife while pointing at us, "Ah, canoeing, the true test of love, my fiancé," and I bursted into laughter for 20 minutes and then finally got our rhythm together. Story 20 at White F used to work at a public library. A black guy asked if we had Diary of a Wimpy White Boy, aka Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Racial tensions were high in this neighborhood, so it felt extra good to laugh with him. Story 21, I was riding the T subway home one night with a Spike's Junkyard sandwich. Of the buffalo chicken variety, a clearly drunk guy with his girlfriend said to me, "Are you going to face that sandwich?" To which I replied yes. He then turned to his girlfriend and said, "Babe, let's get some buffalo chicken." Story 22, riding the public bus in Vegas about 13 years ago. I'm sitting kind of in the middle. There's this guy sitting kind of in the front having an extremely animated conversation with another guy next to him. The other guy looks like he's barely acknowledging what animated guy is saying. We get to a stop, and animated talker guy gets up, but other guy doesn't. It was then that I realized that they weren't together and that this dude was just talking in a semi-crazy way to some rando dude on the bus. But animated talker doesn't want to get off. He wants the other guy to acknowledge that he was right about something. The other guy is just nodding and trying to get on with his life. But this lunatic just kept yammering away. There gets to be some audible grumbling from the other riders because this dude is now holding up the bus. He finally goes to get off. Dude makes it almost to the sidewalk when he does an about-face, gets back on the bus and yells out. And another thing, at that second, nearly everyone on the bus yelled at the guy to GTFO. He obviously wasn't expecting it as he kind of recoiled and skittered away. The guy does kind of this awkward half-run thing directly into a psychiatrist's office. It was at this moment that an older gruff guy who was sitting in the back and quietly reading a newspaper this entire time pipes up and says in a thick East Coast-sounding accent, going to see the psychiatrist, "Go figwa." Everyone on the bus, including myself, just busted out laughing. Story 23, a few months ago, I was waiting at a road crossing with loads of other strangers, waiting for the man to turn green. This was a busy main road in my city. A little girl on the other side of the road did the most accurate impression of the beep beep that the crossing makes so blind people know it's safe to cross, and an entire crowd of people just stepped into the road. I had seen her do it, so I stayed put, but I couldn't stop laughing. My girlfriend was confused. 50 adults pranked by one absolute genius 6-ish-year-old. It was magical. It was really busy, so traffic was hardly moving. There wasn't a chance of being injured. Story 24, I was helping a customer pick out a new bra, and she said she wanted her breasts to be lifted. She said, "Mine are so saggy that if my nipples were eyeballs, I'd be able to see if my shoes were untied." I really tried my best to remain professional, but I couldn't stop laughing, LOL. Story 25, San Francisco and its surrounding area is serviced by railcar subway, known as the BART, the Bay Area Rapid Transit System. While a nominally useful fixture, this mode of transportation suffers from the fact that it evidently intersects several different parallel dimensions, becoming a kind of attraction point for all of the strangeness and insanity that the multiverse can offer. Someone riding the BART might encounter a homeless fellow who claims to have invented Bill Gates, yes. Bill Gates the person, where they could find themselves watching 3 teenagers breakdance their way across the ceiling. Both of those have happened to me, incidentally. But the funniest moment that I had with a BART-riding stranger occurred when I found myself trying to interact with an elderly Chinese woman. The individual in question had come hobbling into the car with a large backpack held in front of her. It was clear that she was trying to find a seat for herself, and the vacant spot next to me was the only easily accessible one. After shuffling over and sitting down, the woman went through a semi-comical series of pantomimes with me as we tried to figure out where she could put her belongings. And although neither of us spoke the other's language, the process helped us develop an odd, sort of in-the-moment camaraderie. That warmth remained as the train started moving, which is when an impromptu lesson of sorts began. My new friend nudged my arm and pointed to a seemingly random person. "Chicken," she said. "Chicken." I repeated. "Chicken." The woman repeated. "Guh, guh, guh." I have since learned that guh is what chickens say in China. I squinted at the person who was allegedly the embodiment of a fowl. She was a young woman with her hair in a tight ponytail, wearing a pantsuit that suggested a career in some variety of cubicle-based environment. Nothing about her screamed chicken, but I suppose that she might have been hiding feathers beneath her clothes. Another nudge pulled me from my thoughts. "Chicken," my companion said again, pointing to someone new. This process continued for a while, and I eventually discovered a pattern. People who were well-kempt, apparently polite, and keeping to themselves were chickens. It was a strange sort of compliment, but certainly not the worst that I'd heard, especially considering that I've personally been referred to as a. The train soon came to a halt at another stop, and passengers went through the dance of switching places with new arrivals, entering and exiting as their commutes dictated. It was then that a young man in worn-out clothes came storming into view. muttering to himself about something which was clearly aggravating him. Then, as the car's door started to close, this fellow appeared to be suddenly struck by an unpleasant realization. "Fuck," the guy shouted, "no ugh." He flailed with his arms, blocking the doors and causing an alarm to sound in the process, then made a big show of prying them apart. "Fuck, hey, where the are you, what the?" As quickly as he had appeared, the fellow had departed. Everyone in the train looked relieved. The woman next to me leaned in close. Not chicken. Try though I did, I couldn't stop myself from laughing out loud. TLDR, in which I am informed of the virtues of the chicken. I was in the drive-thru of a Wendy's one time. An employee exited the building with his headphones on and was singing "Who Let the Dogs Out" at the top of his lungs. He saw me, stopped singing, and started walking away. A few seconds later, he came up to my window and said, "Yes, that is what I'm listening to." Then he walked away. I laughed so hard at the whole situation. Story 26 didn't tell me straight, but only overheard. So this guy was talking to his phone, and why, but his face looked so serious, and he was almost red as tomato. Anger. The phone was on loudspeaker mode. I forgot what to call the thingy when you call someone, and he and the one he's talking to was arguing over that green guy who owned a swamp and has a donkey friend, and the guy on his phone was saying its name was Shrek, and he was saying it was called a Smurf. They were screaming to each other, and people just ignore them and get confused. Edit, hey, thank you for the upvotes, YET1, and new here in Reddit, and I already have a silver. Thank you for that person who gave me that too. Also, as I was saying, I anger is now my new catchphrase. Story 27, when I served, I had a table of about 20 Asian people. The head of the group shook my hand and introduced himself as Tony. Tony the Tiger. He tried to sound cool and tough, but all I could think of was the cereal mascot. Edit, wow, 1 likes. I want to add that when I repeated back in a slightly skeptical voice, Tony the Tiger, he did a cat claw motion and said roar, like a tiger. Story 28, it wasn't until years later I knew what he was saying and then laughed. When I was about 11, my parents were out of town, but I wanted to go to the mall, so I walked. A sort of sketchy guy walked from his sidewalk to mine and asked what you buy in blood. Innocence responded, "Nothing, I just want to see my friends." He laughed to himself and kept walking. But who tries to sell to an 11 years old white suburban child? Edit, added a comma for grammar. Story 29, I was grocery shopping yesterday, and what seemed to be single mom, judging by the stressed out behavior, was there with her 2 girls, both aged between 5 and 8. The girls were really enjoying shopping, touching every item, speaking to every employee and customer, goofing around really hard. Their mom kept telling them to stop and apologized every minute to somebody. Getting even more stressed, I passed by the girls. The older one played with using a flashlight that was on display, working spells on anyone nearby. So she put her spell on me too, making me a giant. I am 2'08" tall, weighing 150 kilograms. She yelled, "Mom, look, it worked." I made him big. I was already laughing. What really made me die laughing inside was when Mom, ultimately stressed, apologized on autopilot while doing the shopping. Looked up, and I saw her face, trying to look sincere while hiding her laughter. Story 30 movie just ended. Me and my dad joined a mad rush to the bathrooms. Urinals are packed. It's our turn to be doing our business. Suddenly someone rips a hug. LOL, it's pretty funny, but we all have manners. Still peeing. Suddenly this dude proclaims, "IT was me," and runs out the door. Whole bathroom erupts in laughter. Story 31, in high school, we were walking down the hall to the buses, and I heard 2 girls in a conversation that cracked me up and confused me. Girl 1, "You go to random guy's house tonight." Something to the effect of looking forward to it. Girl 2, "Oh, well, make sure you bring protection." Already kind of weird as they're just talking in the hall. Girl 1, "What? No, I'm not going to be doing anything like that." Girl 2, "No, I meant like a knife or something. I've been laughing about that for a while now." Story 32, when I was a freshman in college, I had a pair of rainbow bell-bottoms I made and wore a lot. I walking through the city back to the dorms when a guy rode up behind me on a bicycle. He was old, had long, scraggly gray hair, and a bright red and yellow windsuit on. He rode beside me for a second, stared, and then yelled, "Miss, your pants are hot." Way a watt, and the rode away into the sunset. It was so random and hilarious. Every time I wore those pants, my friend would run up behind me and yell, "Your pants are HWAT." Story 33, not me, but one of my customers. He's doing a finishing job for a billionaire in the city when the designer insists they use booties or shoe covers. He said he just had his men take their shoes off at the door. Billionaire woman responds with, "Peter, their socks on my carpet is like your penis on my vagina. Disgusting, funniest thing I've heard in a while." Story 34. When I was about 8 years old, 40 some odd YRS ago, my mother and I were waiting to be seated at a restaurant, and an older gentleman was ahead of us also waiting. The waitress asked him if he'd be smoking back when that was still a thing in restaurants, and he replied no, but I may burst into flames later. Yummy laughed all through lunch at that. In fact, it still makes me giggle, lol. Story 35. I am a hostess at restaurant. and my coworker was holding door open for this table of 4 very, very old black women. And this woman who had just celebrated her 102nd birthday says to her friend, "Can you imagine that? Never thought I'd see the day a white boy holds the door open for us. Oh, if I was younger, I'd have to make my way to you, young man. This probably isn't the funniest, but this happened the other day and came to mind." Story 36. You and your sister look exactly alike. My sister was adopted from Asia. I'm so white-eye freckle instead of tan. I just about died of laughter because the woman actually meant it for context. Shed met my sister a couple weeks before, but I hadn't been there, and Shed mistaken me for my sister. Story 37. I was cosplaying as the 11th Doctor at a Renaissance festival. This troupe of dancers glided past me and greeted me as the good physician. Ick, but just how in character they were made me laugh so hard internally. Edit: no, it's not a reference to the good doctor. Yes, it's a reference to Doctor Who. What the happened to this thread? Edit 2 was Time Traveler Weekend. The Renaissance Festival in my area has themed weekends, Halloween, Highlands, fantasy, etc. This was the Time Traveler Weekend, and I wasn't the only doctor. Story 38. Hey race, a couple won him in Chicago. 14 years old or so, and some older high school kid comes up to me all menacing like. He asks, "You know what today is?" Again in that half-threatening cadence. I quickly answer that I didn't was a regular school day. To which he proudly responds, "ITS Freshman Tuesday, where we beat up freshmen." After processing his response for a few seconds, it didn't make sense, but it's Wednesday, I responded. His face was priceless. 2 also in Chicago, but significantly younger. I was rollerblading around with my buddy when some black kids wielding makeshift weapons surround us. Looking back, they were probably around 12 years old, a few years or elders. Anyways, after encircling, they finally asked, "You guys in the KKK?" I had no idea what that was. The Ku Klux Klan, he clarified. "Oh no," I responded. "I'm in the Fallen Dragoons clan, my Age of Empires 2 clan at the time." I guess my answer sufficed, since they promptly rode away thereafter. In retrospect, my stories don't quite follow the prompt, but hopefully they're enjoyed regardless. First day in basic training. All had broken loose. It was just screaming and confusion. I had an instructor come up to me with another new kid in tow and yelled, "Trainee, do you know where the latrine is? I want you to this trainee to the latrine so he can go sick himself in the proper facilities." I didn't know where they were, but figured I'd give it my best shot, so myself and this kid walk outside. I look over at him, and he's greenish, kind of whimper crying, and hunched over. We take 2 steps outside when he pops projectile vomit all over the ground. Huge mess. I look up and see an even bigger, scarier instructor rounding the corner about 15 feet in front of us. He walks up, looks the kid in the eye, and with an icy hatred, says, "What the did you just do to my ground? Do you really hate my ground so much you'd sick yourself on it? I want you to apologize to my ground, and then clean yourself up." I nearly lost it. The kid whimpered out a "Sorry, I puked on you, ground," and we were on our way. Story 39. At my high school, I overhear a lot of conversations that are absolutely hysterical, the best of which being, "So I just set it ill in the cat litter." Story 40. I was walking out of the school cafeteria, and I overheard 3 kids talking. Kid 1, "Dude, ID totally your dog." Kid 2, "Isn't that illegal?" Kid 3, "No, it's called being a furry. I had to stay quiet, but let me tell you, I laughed hard as when I got home and told one of my friends about it." Story 41. My friend and I, both female, used to go to the Saturday market to buy fruit and veg. My friend is quite shy towards other people. I had just bought 2 huge watermelons and was carrying them, 1 arm each, as a guy walked past us. He shouted, "You've got nice, big melons, sis." Didn't say anything else, just kept walking. My friend was shocked, and I almost peed myself laughing so much. Story 42. Not to me, but I was nearby. I was in a supermarket in the fruit and veg section. 2 women be arguing behind me. One says, "We should get this." The other responds, "No, we're getting this one. It's better. I should know." The first, sounding upset, says, "Yep, but..." The other interrupts and says, "You know, I was a chef. I worked at KFC. I had to go 2 aisles over so they didn't hear me howling with laughter." Story 43. Dude comes by as I'm working on 420 and says, "That floor is looking very fine, SIR. You did a great job." Like this dude was being aggressively nice. Story 44. Went to Chipotle after freshly shaving my head. The cashier started commenting, "Wow, what a day, look at you with your shaved head." "When did you do that?" "Me, like 20 minutes ago." "Him, well, what a world we live in." "You," and her bald head. I felt like I was in a Whitest Kids, skit or something. Story 45. This happened this week. I was eating at Burger King with some friends, and a random guy bursts into the place and says, "Sup," and about to bust it down like Thoshiana, then walks into the bathroom and doesn't come out for like 30 minutes. Story 46. So last week I got into a police control. "Officer, good evening. Where are you coming from?" "Me, from friend place." "Officer, did you drink any alcohol?" "Me, no, sir." "Officer, did you consume any marijuana?" "Me, no." "Officer, what a boring evening. Have a good ride." Laughed a while at this edit. "Sorry for not knowing how to spell Mariah." "Marijuana." "Mariuja." "Weed?" Story 47, I was in a school play, and I played one of the support characters. I had no theater experience, but when the play began, I felt confident. I completely shucked it, even after 20 hours of rehearsals and choreography. But I kind of just shrugged it off. Go to my car. I heard a group of parents talking to their kid also in the play. They asked who was the character I played. The kid said that he really didn't know me that much. The parents proceeded to comment on my performance, saying I looked like, and quote, a retarded penguin, trying to fly figure of speech, meaning I did not belong there. I completely lost it and almost suffocated from laughter. I guess they heard me because they all looked at me, and the kid said that I was him. They said they didn't mean to call me retarded and left. I tried to say it was okay, but I still couldn't breathe. First and last time ever doing theater, they didn't exactly say it to me, but I think it is relatable. Story 48, I dye my hair bright red. I was wearing a white dress, and a woman came up to me and said I looked like a red velvet cupcake. The funniest thing I have heard said to someone else was when a homeless guy in Boston decided to help someone who was parking their car by waving his hands, etc. The driver thanked him, and the homeless guy said ain't no thing but a chicken wing on a string. Story 49, I was in a Victoria's Secret with my GF, and a guy, probably about in his 40s, walks in and says in the most confident, normal voice, I'm going to get a thong for my mother. We both try not to laugh while he was right there, but it didn't work out too well. His wife, I'm assuming, cackled. So we decided it was safe to laugh anyways. Story 50 on the L. In Chicago, a group of older guys with shoe shine kits get off at a stop. One of them drops a small bag of white powder, I presume to be cocaine, on the floor of the car. Another younger guy bends down, picks it up, and tells the guy, you dropped this. Older guy grabs the baggie, doors close. Young guy looks at me and says, I don't know why I did that. I still laugh about it. The young guy was just trying to be polite, and it overrode any other warning signals. Story 51, I was in a full bathroom at a Cavs game using the urinal, and some guy walks up to use the urinal next to me. He then says, nice watch. I was actually wearing a watch. So I said thanks, followed by wait, what? We shared a laugh, and that was it. I still think it's hilarious. Story 52, I was passing the food section at Walmart and saw something behind the counter that caught my attention. I said, excuse me, is that chicken? The lady replied, it's like chicken. Was at McDonald's drive-thru and ordered a McDouble and a large DR pepper. The cashier read my order back and said, okay, one McDouble and a large DR pooper. I was dying laughing and tried to keep a straight face when I pulled up. When she opened the window, she said, hey, did you hear me say DR pooper? And I just started laughing uncontrollably. Story 53, not to me, but definitely memorable. Was waiting for the BART train, public transportation in the Bay Area, and some young, cocky-looking was yelling at the booth attendant because he missed his train. First, the rant was about the schedule being off. Then wait until my father hears about this. Then about his overall disappointment in the station. Then about you people, etc. The attendant pulls out a book and starts reading. The guy gets furious at this and demands her attention. She loudly retorts when this conversation swings back to something germane to our situation. Then he'll pay attention. He yells and stomps off. I just stood there with love in my heart for that lady. Story 54, I worked in a kid's hospital where we sometimes had to transport infants to the morgue. Carrying them wrapped up led to, oh, can I see your baby? No. The morgue stretcher gurney is just overkill, pardon the pun, for a 3-pound baby. So we bought a Longaberger covered basket for their last trip. It's sturdy, solid, and avoids awkward questions. Until one day on the elevator, another employee, oblivious to our transport solution, says, I don't know what y'all got in that basket, but it sure smells good. Try not to lose it right then. But it did add some levity to a sad situation. Story 55, I don't know if this counts, but one time I was walking out of 711 and a homeless guy outside said, they'll tell you a joke for a cigarette. I handed him one, and he says, what did the tampon say to the other? Nothing, they're both stuck-up cunts. I didn't want to lose it in front of him, so I gave him another, but when I got to my car, I started laughing pretty hard. Story 56, my aunt was walking in Detroit, and a homeless guy kept screaming SIT on at her over and over. The time I was waiting for takeout, and the amputee owner struck up a convo. My friend, you have to be really careful if you ever get shot in the knee or any leg bone. They don't warn you that you can't have for months. One night you're taking home a beautiful girl to show her your scars, and the next morning your leg's gone. Story 57 years ago, I was at a stop sign, slightly distracted by this beautiful woman walking her dog. I go to pull out into traffic and almost T-bone this dude. Again, traffic. He lays on his horn. I get pissed and lay on my horn, even though I 100 know I'm in the wrong. Suddenly I hear this haha, your fault, coming from across the street. All Nelson, Simpson style. I look over. Yep, it was the beautiful woman walking her dog. I burst out laughing and try to be a safer driver. Story 58, my dad once told me I was almost an astronaut. He then proceeded to tell me that if he had just pulled out a few seconds earlier, I would have been shot into space. I was early teens and was uncertain whether or not to laugh, unsure if he expected me to even understand the joke or not, but inside I was cackling.